This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, or so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. In today's episode, I continue the theme of looking at how to help you perform better under pressure, with a focus on transferring your skills from training or practice to competitive situations, or in this case, matches, where I'm joined all the way from Brisbane with performance coach to many batsmen in cricket and a coach with a big interest in sports psychology, Jarrod Leathem. That's right, this week we have a cricketing theme in time to perfection after the Aussies secured the 2020 World Championship in Dubai at the weekend. So Jarrod, why do you think so many cricketers struggle from transferring their skills, their form in the nets out into the middle in a competitive match?
Yeah, I think like the question itself, like it's very broad, and I'm going to sort of bring it like full circle here. So I think like majorly there's a couple of things. So number one is like there's a way in how you have to train for this sport, and a lot of people's training are number one like very, very rigid. Your swing of your bat might be very rigid, and it's not open. And sometimes that will have like a negative feedback loop. You might have a negative feedback loop to your mindset. Like if you know you're not training well, that can impact your game. So that's like the first thing. The second thing is like, what is your game? Like, do you have a game mindset? Are you relaxed when you go out to games? Are you letting past stresses affect your games? And that's something that you have to, like you need help to build that. Some people can just have it, but the major gap in what I can see in really good players, like let's just take pro players, for example. You look at the top players and the bottom players, there's a little bit of a fundamental difference, but the biggest difference from that point, once you have the basics right, is all with your mindset. So that's a fairly broad answer, I guess, but it's all mindset based for the most part and a little bit fundamental based.
Okay, so let's dig into the training aspect a little bit deeper then. So you talk about rigid training as opposed to training in a more helpful way. So you're going to be confident out in the middle. So yeah, tell me more about that.
Yeah. So yeah, shout out to you for this one per our last chat. But to try and like split up your training, that's like the first thing. So we're having like really great success with that at the moment. Number one is like getting really clear about what and also like how you are training. So what are you training on that day? Maybe you're looking at more your fundamental base. Maybe you're looking at your processes. So having a process to perform well. Maybe you're looking at more expansive game. Maybe you're like opening up your shots a little bit more. Having a session with complete no judgment and just trying different things. It really depends. You've got to be able to split up your training, but also being rigid in like the way you train as well. So rigid in maybe it's your technique that's rigid. Maybe it's your fundamentals that are rigid. And we know with batsmen, like we need to open up your bat swing. We don't want to close the bat swing. So what we're finding with our players at the moment, as a prime example, we're opening up their bat swing within the first week, and they're getting scores very quickly. And as I mentioned before, people are like, nah, this is a slow burn. For me to go from A to B, it has to be a long process. Doesn't have to be that way. You just got to focus on the right things.
So yeah, you've got me intrigued. And so obviously you've talked about their fundamentals, process. You've talked about expansive, non-judgmental, and ways of practicing. So process is something that I'm big on and interested in. So tell me more. Like, what does it look like for a batsman to practice their process?
Yeah. So if you're practicing the nets, like largely you can have processes when you get to the nets. You can go before the nets. You can go when you're at the nets. So generally what we do is to get batsmen to, number one, like work out their processes early in the way of, okay, what do you do like before the game? What do you do when you're at the game, as in warm-ups? What do you do when you're walking out to the middle? What do you do when you're out there? What do you do between balls? So as you can see, it's a very, very broad. And, when you start to get into it, there's a lot of different things that you can have in place. So that's like one of the things that we get people to practice at the nets. And also like when you're performing in the nets, trying to be conscious of, okay, what was I doing here when I'm playing well? And if you can really grasp what you're doing when you're training well, you can generally put that into games. The other split I was going to mention in training, which I forgot to mention, was having like a performance split as well. So making sure you have a net where it's purely game focused. You might have a field set and, you're working off of that as well. I thought I'd just throw that in as well.
That makes a lot of sense. So from what you've said there, there's a lot of detail goes into the mental preparation there when you're talking about, before, during, and then afterwards. How do you as a cricket coach go through that detail with you, with the players?
Yeah, like I think as a coach, it's trying to simplify things so it makes sense. And because obviously people have very simple brains, myself included. I need things laid out nice and simple. So it's a process. So before they come into our system, what we do is we'll just work out their thought patterns. And generally, there's 4 thought patterns that people have, and we will just want them to have awareness around this. So we have one, positive future and negative future. And then we have positive past and negative past. So if I'm going to go into more detail on this, like positive into the future is, you're getting out when you might be premeditating a big shot. That's like your positive future. Your negative future is fear of failure, which is the same for, most sportsmen. They're scared of, as a batsman, getting out. Maybe a different sport like rugby, they're scared of missing their place kick. So that's what your fear of failure is. Now you've got the past ones. So you've got negative past, which is maybe you've had a bad performance the week before and you let that sort of flow on to the next week. And then you've got positive past, which is also playing a good shot in the past and then getting more confidence from that and then getting out. So that's super complex, but people generally have 2. It depends on what stage of their career you're at as well. Depends on the type of person. Generally, we're finding that the majority of people have 2. If you have more of a complex sort of mind, you might have more than that, but generally it's 2. So trying to identify that and sort of make them aware of it, that's the first step. And then the second step is literally just building processes out to help them perform in games. So some of those include breathing techniques. Some of that includes a whole process that we go through, like writing down visions and goals and things like that. That's just boost motivation at the start, basically. And then figuring out, okay, what are my processes, getting clearer about, as I said before, what am I doing before, during the game, after? So yeah, that's our process.
When you said a lot of people have 2, do you mean they have sort of 2 preferred styles, and I suppose the 2 traps that they fall into if they're out in the middle?
Yeah, so as I said, 2, negative future, positive future, negative past, and positive past. Yeah, they have 2 of those.
Okay, right. So let's come up with a scenario then. So assuming I'm a really positive person, and I'm out in the middle. I've got, say, 30 runs under my belt at the time, and I'm thinking about the past shots that I've been playing, and I'm happy with that. I'm positive, and then my mind's flipping forwards, fast forward if you like, where I'm seeing myself scoring getting a 50 and then the century. How do you help that person?
Yeah, great question. It's about trying to allow them to be present. So putting things in place that brings them back to the present. So as I mentioned, like first awareness. So you're not going to get to present if you aren't aware that it's even happening, right? And you could be getting out for someone listening to this, a batsman, you could be getting out every week from the same thought process. You just don't know it yet. So it's awareness around that first. And then once they have that sort of light bulb in the game, it's like, okay, now I need a process to bring myself present again. And this doesn't have to be rigid and the same thing. Like you might be someone who walks out to square leg, as simple as that, and you have like 3 deep breaths. It could be as simple as that. It could be something as complex as maybe you do 10 seconds of Wim Hof. It really just depends on the person, what you want to interchange. The other point I wanted to make on that is like you don't have to be like superstitious with it. Like you don't have to walk down, tap the pitch 3 times, touch your left pad, touch your right pad. Like you don't have to be superstitious with it. But what we're just doing is trying to get maybe 3-4 things that people feel comfortable with and just rolling through that. And that's generally a way that we try to bring people present. And we also know that someone can't be present the whole time. It's not going to happen. The best players in the world, they're not present 100% of the time they're out there. So sometimes it's also just cutting them some slack and taking a few balls even to just get the middle of the bat again and then find that flow again. So
I'm pleased you mentioned that about the best players in the world there, because it is perfectly natural, isn't it, to get stuck in the past a little bit, to be looking forward in the future. And as you've said, it is just simply all about awareness. We're humans. That's the way our brains are built, unfortunately. Would you agree, though, as humans, we can be too judgmental in lots of situations? And well, let's go back to that situation. It's very easy to judge yourself, isn't it? Oh no, I'm thinking ahead. Oh, that's a bad thing. And then you all of a sudden you've shifted from being in that flow state in the zone to then doubting yourself a little bit and thinking about, oh no, I'm going to get out now.
Yeah, I do definitely agree with that. I think that again, like it can depend on your personality type as well. But you'd say most of us are fairly conscious or self-conscious people a lot of the time. So yeah, it's very easy, as I said, to fall into that space.
All right, we'll flip this then now. So I know we've talked a lot about batting. Let's go with bowling, right? So I'm a bowler, and maybe I'm in the 2020 World Cup right now, and I've been knocked around the park a little bit in my previous over. So I've got a bit of negative stuff going on in my head about the past, but also I'm now coming into bowl, and I'm thinking, I hope I'm not going to get knocked out the park again here. And it makes us, indecisive, a little bit nervous and stuff like that. What do you say to that bowler, that cricketer?
Yeah, like first and foremost, there's the thing about obviously mindset in sport is you're fixing similar problems across the board. So like similar to batting, like you're still trying to be present even in that moment. And obviously with a pro sportsman, easier said than done, right? Because this is their career, this is their life. They're getting paid to play. Bucket loads of money for this T20 tournament, IPL contracts. There's a lot that sort of goes into it. For that bowler, it's trying to implement something as similar. So do you have it? Like ask them a question. Like if you're a coach, even listening to this, like ask the bowler, like, okay, you got hit for 4. What do you have to sort of bring yourself back? If you're falling into a negative space or a self-conscious space, do you have a process to bring yourself back? You could go through your warm-up routine again if you wanted to. Like there's no harm in that. I would ask them as well, like, what spot are you trying to hit? Like, are you trying to hit a dime? Like, are you trying to hit a 5-cent piece? Or maybe you're trying to hit a piece of paper? You know what I mean? Because they might be thinking, oh, I have to hit this spot or I'm going to get hit for 4. And a lot of times if you fall into that space, you're just throwing it in. You're literally just throwing it in the slot, most balls, which you've seen happen in the last overs of the game, or maybe they're bowling full tosses. You see this all of the time. And I think first it's like, okay, do we have something, a breathing technique, visualization? Do we have something in place or multiple things in place that we can use? And then the next thing is, okay, what are we trying to achieve? What are you trying to hit? Are you being too hard on yourself? Are you trying to hit a dime or a piece of paper, as I said before? Yeah.
That's interesting what you've said, because I think that there's some real good advice out there for coaches. Some coaches can fall into the trap where they sort of tell their players how to go about the business. But the way you articulated it I thought was really, really clever there. And it made it seem to me that, good coaches ask really good questions. And yeah, you shared some cracking questions there for coaches. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that, not even just coaching, like your life is judged by the quality of your questions. Like, what questions do you ask yourself? And myself included, like, I can fall into traps sometimes where, maybe a player isn't going as well or hitting the ball as well as I'd like. And I'm trying to push, right? I'm trying to push and push and push. But rather than push them up there, it's almost trying to just ask the right questions. And that can sometimes be that sort of fast track. So yeah, as I said, ask them the right questions and that'll make it really simple for them to know. It's a thing with like sales as well. If you can get someone to tell you the right answer, they're going to think that's the right answer rather than just being told the right answer. So I think that's, quality as well.
Yeah, no, I like that. Fear of failure, you talked about. Obviously, as a batsman, you can go weeks on end without scoring a run at times, which it's got to be really difficult. And then the walk of shame off the pitch with your head down and poor body language, cursing and everything that comes with it. It's got to be really tough for a batsman. How do you help batsmen get over that fear of failure?
It's really tough. First and foremost, this is for most players going through this. A lot of players going through this. It's a form, like when you're in a form slump, it's really hard. And the first thing is like, okay, let's say you've just gotten, as you said, a couple of low scores in a row. It's I would ask them, okay, what you can dive into different things like training. You can look at their training. You can look at their process. I would look mostly at their process. What are they doing to get themselves in the right headspace? More so, like what is their body language like when they walk out? That's a really important one, because to have two ducks in a row potentially and have to walk out and try to have the body language, and like I try and teach my clients, we're trying to have a body language that everything is unattached to their outcome, their body language, their processes, the way they carry themselves on the field. A lot of it is just attached to their outcome. So, there's going to be times where you have those couple of low scores in a row, and potentially it's going to be mostly in their process and trying to build their identity and their character around being unattached to outcomes, which is tough for someone, again, playing pro sport, getting paid, IPL contracts, T20 contracts, tough thing to do, but it's something that I think the top players understand well. And I'll mention also that older players do well, like more mature players do well. Maybe that they have more going on in their life. Maybe they have a couple of jobs, or maybe they have a business or property or something. They have other things that they're going to as well. So yeah, to simplify that down for people, it's okay. Like look at their processes, training, games. Is cricket like the only thing in their life as well? Is that why they're attached so much to the outcome? And it's just trying to build their identity again around remaining unattached to those outcomes. Something, as I tell my players as well, and the last point I'll make on this, is when you are out there and you might be a bit nervous or shaky or a little bit conscious about what's going on, self-conscious about what's happening, is to just like drop the judgment for the first even 6 to 12 balls. In some cases, I'll sometimes reel them back in. And it's just to get the ball out of the middle of the bat. That's all I want them to do, is just feel the ball out of the middle of the bat to start with. Start just trying to pick up lengths as well. If you're judging yourself, it's really hard to pick up length because, as we know, like our prefrontal cortex gets blocked. You want to be able to move. So it's trying to feel the ball out in the middle of that get the confidence back, see the lengths. Then when you know you're seeing the lengths, the next one that's pitched up or dropped short, you know you're seeing it, and that ball is dispatched and you're back on your way. So, yeah.
Yeah, the bit you mentioned there about being unattached to outcomes is something that people find really, really difficult, isn't it? Because the conversations that take place straight away, I don't know, a kid plays a match, they come home and their parents, what's the first question they ask? So how did you do today? Or how many runs did you score? And did the team win? All of those outcome style questions come into it, which make it really, really, really tough. But no, you're right. You don't have any control over the results, over the outcome, and there's definitely something in that. The whole thing about just focusing on internal things. The other point you mentioned was about how professional players especially do have other things going on in their life outside of the sport, outside of cricket. When you're young, it can be quite difficult, can't it? Because you can just put all your eggs in one basket, and you sort of your identity, your self-esteem, your self-worth is all like built around you actually scoring runs or taking wickets. Do you come across that a lot?
100%. In people that even know a bit about mindset and sport, it's honestly like some of the transformations that we're having, we're not just like with people's batting, but people's identity is amazing, because it's not just shifting in their batting, but it's shifting their life as well. And they're actually getting a lot happier. But yeah, we come across that a lot. And again, it's a hard thing to coach, because you're trying to shift identities sometimes. And for some people, their self-worth has been attached to their scores for years. And they might go to trainings and get pissed at people, or pissed as in get angry or frustrated at people. They might, after the game, be frustrated at their wife or put it on to other people. And this has happened. Like, we have real life examples of this in our coaching programs, and it's trying to shift that. And we're doing this through like, okay, every week you're showing up to a mindset call, every single week, whether we've got new content on it or not. We're setting up your week to be able to create wins and create confidence in your life. So it's trying to build that confidence. And then along with that, we're trying to shift as well your cricket identity too. We're trying to be unattached to outcomes. And yeah, there's a range of things that we can do for that as well, if you'd like to hear about that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're doing some great work there, and yeah, you've answered the questions, yeah, fantastically. You've shared some fantastic insights there for the listeners. What I'd like now, I suppose, is could you sort of summarize all of this and put it into 3 key takeaways for the listeners?
Yeah, I would like to show, before I touch on the 3, hopefully if I can share my screen, I can give you some actual, like, this is a bomb drop right now, because I don't usually do this, but I wanted to share something as well with you, David, but as well as your listeners that I've learned. And I will give the person a shout out who I learned this from. So we basically call this is a process that we do before games. And we call this a circle activity. Super, super simple. Okay, so basically I'll just do this really simply. Like, I don't want to take ages with this, obviously, because time. But what you're doing is you're drawing a circle, a great shaped circle. And what you're going to do is you're going to write everything that you can control. So like, I'll just put this in text. Can control inside the circle. This is before games, guys. Like, you can do this on like a Saturday. You can do this on like the night before. So I want you to write everything you can control inside the circle, and then outside, I want you to write everything that you can't control. So on game day, like, obviously you just want to focus on the stuff you can control, internal stuff, such as maybe it is your fundamentals, your mindset, your processes, your body language, everything like that. You're going to write inside. Outside, you're going to write things like sledging, conditions, umpires, the other team, fielders, bowlers, anything like that. So I thought I would just share that anyway. And shout out to, I got this from Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier is a UFC fighter. So shout out to obviously him and whoever obviously taught him that. But I thought I'd just share some like real value for anyone watching this that you can literally implement right now and be able to use.
No, that's fantastic. What I'll do is in the show notes for the podcast on Apple, I'll put a link to that as well. It's a really helpful one to, like, as you say, to help people prepare for a match. So thanks for that. Okay, so that can be one key takeaway. Give me two more.
I'll dive in. I'll do three straight up. So the first is work on training and playing processes. I want to write this down as well so I know what I said. Your training and playing processes to be able to help you perform the best. This is this is broad, but it's, in some cases, it might take you to get a little bit more help with it and get some individual help with this. But that's like your first thing. Obviously, your second thing, all of these processes need to be like unattached to outcomes, okay? So if your identity is built around cricket right now and scores that you're getting really down on yourself potentially when you've had a bad day or had a bad innings, it's trying to stay unattached to this. The third key point, which this will help boost you as well, is, as I said, get some more help with it. That's the biggest thing that I could say, because a lot of people are stuck. If you can get this, let's say even like a young kid is watching this, let's say 13, 14, 15. If you can get onto this now, when you, even just before, if you're hitting like the puberty years, the years where you get a little bit self-conscious with yourself, you might be not fully grown or filled out yet. If you get onto this stuff earlier rather than later, this can literally like change your career. Your enjoyment of the game can go up, your scores can go up, the way you act around your team will be better, more friends. We just see in our programs the most like positive influence on not only like cricket but people's like overall lives. So it's, if you haven't got help with this, guys, like definitely, if it's not me, like reach out to David, reach out to someone else, and just get yourself some more help with it.
No, I agree. I'm going to go back to your third point first about support. I'm sure I've read something out there which states that 95% of people that read a book, like a self-help book, just read it and then they don't take any action. And there's only about 5% of people who actually do take some action from it. And certainly by seeking support, it's going to massively help you and guide you in that way. So don't just read the book, take action. That's the message.
They say like obviously information is so like vast, but if like information alone was enough, like everyone would be ripped, have like 6 packs, be millionaires, drive around in expensive cars, you know what I mean? So I agree with that.
Most definitely. And then going back to your first point, which you did allude to it, touched on it earlier, about the whole processes and when you're playing at your best. Would you agree that most people, or an awful lot of people out there, when they are playing really well, playing at their best, they really don't have a clue what they do out in the middle or out there? And it's such an important thing to recognize and bring to your own awareness.
Yeah, because you're always going to hit that sort of roadblock, right? And I think for myself, if I bring this full circle, and for myself, if I'm looking back at my own career, I think like juniors, where I live, I was probably, looking at stats, I was probably one of the best juniors going around and that had come through where I am. But I always hit roadblocks, and those roadblocks came at higher levels that I was playing at. And I didn't know, like, because those higher levels induce more sort of performance anxiety, I had no idea what I was doing when I was playing it at that sort of club junior level. So for someone watching this, maybe you're like, I average 100, like maybe I average 100 in third grade or something. I don't need this. But what about when you got to second grade and you start averaging 10 for your first 3 games, and then you start getting more anxiety, and then you start getting out more? There's players all the time that drop levels sometimes and they go worse. So or they go up and then they come down and they go worse. So as you said, it's so important to be aware of where you're at when you're playing your best, and then what's happening when you're playing bad too.
I've loved the conversation, Jarrod. We could have quite easily continued this for a good hour or so more, but needs to end at some point. Whereabouts can the listeners reach out to you if they want to have a conversation?
Yeah, I think Facebook is definitely the best place to reach me. So if you type in JARROD, and then also last name LEATHEM, you can find my Facebook. Send me an ad. I won't buy it. You can also find my batting group. We give out a lot of free tips on our batting group. You can find that on Facebook. You just type in high performance for batsmen. If you're really old school and you do want to email me, go jarrod.leathem7@gmail.com and you'll find me there.
Brilliant. I'll add them little bits of notes in the show notes for all the listeners. And yeah, I've loved the conversation. A big thank you for your time.
Yeah, no worries. It was great.
I enjoyed recording this episode and I hope you enjoyed listening too. Cricket, I'd say, is my favourite sport to watch on TV. The skill involved in 2020 and one-day cricket and the speed that the games can change, and then the shift in mindset required and the tactical elements to test cricket fascinate me. And for those batsmen who find it hard to dig themselves out when they're in a bad run of form, I hope this has helped you especially. For more tips, as well as Jarrod's Facebook group, you'll note I have some cricketing blogs which might be of interest. And for the next few weeks, we'll be continuing this theme, but bringing in different ways of looking at the challenges that people do face in this respect, in terms of transferring their skills from training or practice to competitive situations and matches. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sports psychology resources. The Sport Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.